Redditors with personality disorders, narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, etc. What are some of your success stories regarding relationships after being diagnosed? I have schizoid personality disorder. I'm 48. I've not dated since 1992. If she hadn't asked me, I probably never would have dated, but my curiosity got the best of me. I'm also chronically unemployed. I've never been able to keep a job, mostly because I don't build relationships with my coworkers. School was a disaster, probably for the same reasons. I don't seem to be interested in things the way other people are, so I'm impossible to motivate. Try graveyard shift security. Being a night watchman is a great way to work away from the heck that is other people. I was recently diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder. I'm 28. I grew up with the message that intimacy equals surrendering all control to the other person, and I was never able to trust my parents or family members because I knew they were more concerned about themselves than me. As an adult, I've always tended to lose myself in relationships, lose sight of my own wants and needs, and form myself around the wants and needs of my friends and partners, whilst feeling resentful for being unable to show the real me to anyone. Currently I have no real friends because I find that stuff exhausting, and I have a boyfriend, but I hate the way I absorb his values and opinions, and I miss being in touch with my true self like when I'm single. I desperately want to have meaningful relationships in my life, but I can't escape the impulse to become subservient to whomever I allow close to me, and I end up resenting them as their identities take hold of me. I don't want to be alone, but alone is the only way I feel in control of myself. I can't say I'm a success story, because I only recently received this diagnosis and I still have a lot to work on, but at least I know what I'm dealing with now, and for me success will consist of learning how to actually share my true thoughts, feelings, opinions, with people, which is really freaking hard, how to end a relationship that doesn't suit me rather than suiting myself to my relationships, and learning to trust myself even when others disagree with me. I think I have a long road ahead. Edit, wow, thank you for the silver and gold. I didn't expect my post to resonate with so many people. I'm glad my insight has been helpful. Since a lot of you are curious about AVPD, here are some links that can tell you more about it. Link to all articles are in the description of this video, friend. To share a bit more about my situation, receiving this diagnosis has been a long journey for me. I've experienced social struggles to such an extreme that I actually decided to get evaluated for autism spectrum disorder, a year-long process in the US, and the results turned up AVPD instead. So what causes this disorder? There is no single known cause, but in my case I have a long history of hurt and abuse starting from early childhood, which likely encouraged this to develop. My mother has BPD along with her own history of severe hurt. Unfortunately, she never got help and took her anger out on me and my siblings. I strongly suspect my father has Asperger's, which is why I decided to get evaluated for ASD myself, so needless to say both of my parents were emotionally unavailable. My mother in particular was very volatile and terrifying. She would fly into rage at the drop of a hat and punish me at any time for any reason, so the only way to survive was through absolute compliance with her wishes. My dad was not a boo-per-se, but he is very stubborn and has to have things his way 100% of the time without regard or understanding for the feelings of others. They also went through a messy divorce when I was around 8 years old, with both of them sneaking off to have affairs and cheat on one another, so their focus was not really on us kids. On top of this, I got bullied by my older siblings in a trickle-down effect. With this being my home environment, there was simply no place for my own wants or needs, and I was a very quiet, shy child. My only safe place was inside my own head, where I built an elaborate fantasy world to escape to, something I now know to be called maladaptive daydreaming. I don't think I would have gotten through childhood without my fantasy world, since it was my sanctuary and my reason for living. However, since I had imaginary friends there, I neglected to make actual friends or develop my social skills. I relied on this fantasy world well into my college years, by the way. In adulthood I've struggled with all of my intimate relationships, however the worst and most recent one was abusive, which made my symptoms 1,000 times worse and made me realize how poor my boundaries truly were. I guess the one good thing that came of it was my decision to seek therapy. Currently I am struggling to find a job because I keep panicking and ditching my job interviews, and I have been isolating myself pretty bad lately because being in proximity to other people stresses me out too much. For example, I typically have to sit in my car for 20 minutes before going into a grocery store because the thought of being in a crowded place is exhausting. Anyway, that was a bit of a ramble, but what I'm saying is that there are some big environmental factors in why I am the way I am. For those of you wondering whether you have this disorder, if you have a history of hurt, it certainly increases the likelihood. Everyone is different though, and these are just my personal experiences. If you're identifying with the symptoms, my advice would be to find a good therapist and work towards finding your own voice, no matter how long or how many people have drowned it out. You deserve to be seen, heard, and known. Thank you for such an in-depth answer. I've always wondered why people can be afraid of intimacy, and I've never seen it worded as intimacy equals surrendering. That honestly makes so much sense now. I was suffering for years with unknown mental health issues and had a string of awful relationships with bad people. I finally got diagnosed BPD, started getting help, and meet an amazing person who supports me, puts up with my sometimes over-the-top mood swings with kindness and love. Sometimes I worry I'm putting too much on him and tell him this often. He always bats it away, saying I'm worth it. To be clear, I don't pain him or say horrible things to him, it's just my mood around him that can be toxic. If I get upset, I can't really stop the process and it can be very stressful, with me crying and unable to self-soothe, etc. I do my best to keep these things to a minimum, and am getting better the more time goes by, and even just blurting out how I feel and getting a hug off him helps so much, knowing I'm not being judged even if I'm acting like a child. I still have a long road ahead, and maybe one day he will realize it's too much for him, which I would totally understand. It's shown me what a person can be, and what everyone deserves, love and understanding, and I'll always be grateful to him for that. I'm not unlovable just because I'm sick. I believe that I have some, or maybe a lot, narcissistic traits, never having been told by any of my numerous therapists, and I never realized it until I was with my now husband. I've come to learn through tons of self-reflection and awareness that it's due to my need for control because of an almost complete lack of boundaries as a child. I also have OCD tendencies and severe anxiety, and it's always manifested as severe irritability and anger, outrage at the tiniest of things. But I never in a million years thought that was the problem until I had been together with my husband for about a year and we were expecting our second child. I have been working meticulously on myself for the past 3 years and have a long way to go, but can now identify my triggers, and also I am much less demanding and or controlling, and I am aware of the subconscious emotional manipulation I was using on my husband. He was finally able to express how much it affected him, and it really sank in for me the degree of damage I was doing to my relationships with others, friendships, and my children included, and I am so lucky that I was able to see it and start healing so that I didn't continue on that path and hurting those I loved. Well, my father's a psychopath who once told me that psychopaths don't like being called that. He'd consider his greatest success that of being able to hold down a marriage with a kid, along with multiple girlfriends. I have been diagnosed with antisocial personality. Honestly, I hide it. No way anyone can look at you the same way if you confess. I have a very close friend who admitted to me that he had a diagnosis of antisocial personality, and honestly I was very surprised, but it didn't change how I felt about him. It actually helped me understand him a bit better in some ways, or at least understand that I might never fully understand him and learn to be okay with that. Really nice to see this question. I've been with my boyfriend for 5+ years, and was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder about 2.5 years into our relationship. Before my diagnosis, even though we got along amazingly, communicated well, and were generally happy, I would find myself throwing toddler-like tantrums at any perceived or imagined slight. I hated this about myself. I thought I was a bad person because I just couldn't control myself. My partner happens to be an amazing people reader. He seems to just naturally pick up on people's personality and intentions as easily as I notice hair color. He was nothing but understanding. Even though we had little knowledge of mental health, we both knew something was off, and he was a constant support as I sought out treatment. I was diagnosed with BPD and given a therapist who specialized in PTSD in veterans. It turns out my flare-ups were somehow similar to a PTSD flashback. I was taught a bunch of techniques to use when I felt myself starting to flare out. It was also the first time I realized that my parents had been incredibly emotionally negligent, to the point where I hadn't actually learned to deal with emotions. What was accidentally taught instead was that if I am angry or sad, I am about to be yelled at. It's taken 3 years, but I've found the right combo of meds. I'm not cured, and I'm definitely not perfect. But I don't have flare-outs anymore. Sure, I sometimes raise my voice when I shouldn't, or get into a stupid argument with my boyfriend, but I'm working on myself every day and we're super solid, and super in love. I'm actually typing this beside him aboard a ferry on our way to, what will hopefully be, our new life. In 3 hours I'll be doing the entrance exam for a college program that I'm really excited about, and afterwards we're checking out the shop he'll be managing in September. We have a cat and a dog together, we illustrated a book together, found a 20,000-year-old fossil together, and foraged together at least once a week. Ha 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 he 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 ha. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to Reddit Said It. Or don't. I'm not your boss.